So this episode is one of my favorites, and it's not just because Rosie Peacock is one of the greatest names ever,
Yes.
but because the topic of plant medicines is so fascinating to me. And I think it's a crying shame that all of this research that was coming forward in the 60s got shut down
Yes.
because of politics,
Yeah.
essentially, and all that
Yep.
time was lost. And now we're just starting to do the research again and look back at what was already coming out then and is now being reinforced. Studies showing the improvement for people with PTSD, with depression, with anxiety, eating disorders, substance abuse. Like there is
Yeah.
real evidence to show how helpful these plant medicines can be when done correctly in the right environment. And I'm just so grateful that
Yeah.
it's having a rebirth.
Well, I think she explains it so beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about the three ways of using it. One is recreational, which everybody can poo-poo or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is the medicinal, and then number three is people are using it spiritually. I think people are
Mm-hmm.
wanting to find, more connection.
Yeah.
But, personally, we are our little family here has all tried some of these techniques, and it is pretty amazing. It is very powerful though, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the thing that I want to make sure everybody understands is that the way to use it is to be using it with a coach. So before, during, and after, which
Right.
is which is what Rosie does, and she describes this work that she's doing in Europe. So I think it's not to be taken lightly, and to be
Right.
done well. It takes a lot of work, right?
Right. And she talks about that, about, how you work with her many sessions before you even show up to actually do the ritual. And
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like when the Mitchell family finally gets on our European vacation that we've been talking about, that's gonna be one piece of it. Okay, let's go see Big Ben and then let's go see Rosie Peacock and
Yeah,
do some good work.
that's for sure.
Yeah.
This was a good one. You guys are gonna love this. Hold on.
Yes.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
So, just a trigger warning for today's episode, we will be talking about therapeutic use of psychedelics or plant medicine, and we're going to talk about depression, anxiety, even mention suicide. So, do take care of yourself, but tune in for this really interesting episode. All right, so welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are, as always, so thrilled that you are joining us. And today we are speaking with Rosie Peacock, who is a modern medicine woman and a coaching psychologist, MSc, a facilitator of expanded states of consciousness, and psychedelic integration coach and researcher. So we are going to get into some really interesting topics today. So welcome, Rosie. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, so Rosie gets this beautiful name, Rosie Peacock. And for those of you who aren't watching, and get on the YouTube, and you have to see Rosie. She's really beautiful. She's a brand new mom. So she just shared a funny little story about her son not feeling so well, but she hopped on the podcast anyway. And so we are here doing it. But I'm super excited. Marci and I have been having discussions amongst ourselves about the use of ayahuasca. I mean, all the things that are sort of coming down the pike. There's sort of a new heightened awareness, I think, in the States. Rosie comes to us from England, so we're not sure what the rules are there versus here. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But anyway, Rosie, I watched some of your YouTubes over the past couple of days, and I'm completely inspired by the work that you're doing. So go ahead and give us a little background on who you are and how you came to do this beautiful work.
Sure, thank you for that gorgeous introduction. So, yeah, I say that I walk the medicine path, and the reason I say that is because when you work intentionally with plant medicines, plant teachers, it becomes a form of life path, whether that's, you know, for many people, it becomes their spiritual practice as well, or it becomes so much more than just a single incident of a certain ceremony or experience. Now, some people who have never encountered psychedelics are probably hearing the word ceremony and thinking, what does that even mean? So
yes,
for those
that's okay.
They're imagining like 60s, 70s hippie, like concert free love. Yeah, that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, and that's why we're so
exactly.
happy to have you, because we want to demystify these things and help people understand what it's all about.
Well, there's three different types of ways really that people approach working with psychedelic substances. One of them is recreationally. We're thinking Woodstock, you know, having a great time. We're thinking the kind of classic, and maybe even you're taking acid and supposedly going to jump out of windows. That's really that kind of paradigm around the recreational use at parties, at festivals. I personally don't see that there's anything wrong with that. There are some people who are still very anti it, but you know, I think anything done with the right safety measures, crack on. But that to be said, there is now emerging a therapeutic use of psychedelics. This was first touched on in the 50s and 60s, and there was a lot of research that came out. However, because it got so wrapped up in the counterculture movement and there was such a negative press against psychedelics, they were made illegal, and all of the research towards their therapeutic effect was shut down. It's now emerging in research and papers that it can be incredibly powerful for people, reframing the way that their mind has perspective on things, which can be very helpful for people with things like ADHD, OCD. It's been positive in trials for PTSD, for depression, for anxiety, for eating disorders, even for addiction recovery. Various different psychedelic compounds have been shown to be really positive tools and medicines for a lot of kind of mental discordance or upset. And then the third way, which I kind of mentioned briefly, this ceremony, is the spiritual path, where you are working with plant medicines ceremonially. And so you guys are from the Americas. That's where a large part of this tradition came from, people using ayahuasca in ceremonies. But it comes from all over the world. There's been history of working with plants in this way ceremonially, whether it's the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, whether we're looking at blue lotus use in ancient Egypt, whether we're looking at soma use, which is in the yogic Indian scriptures, or whether we're looking at ibogaine in the tribes of Africa. Literally all over the world, people have been using plants to feel closer to their connection to the divine spirit. And so the reasons that I am interested in these plants is so wide and so vast, from whether microdosing makes you a happier mom to whether you can actually meet God and have a more spiritual life. You know, it's such a wide scope of these applications of these plants and the way that they can be tools to the betterment of humanity. So that's, I guess, a little bit of an overview of my interest in the topic.
That was beautifully said. I love that. That really, because there is this so much stigma to it, and that's like, let's drop all that and just, there's so much potential for the betterment of humanity. Like you say, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think because we've overly fixated on the recreational focus, I think people have then overlooked the other two aspects, which are so incredibly rich.
Yes.
And I mean, you can sit on either side of a argument about whether people should be able to do what they want with their own bodies and recreational use
Yeah.
of things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I don't think anyone can argue that people should be unable to access treatment for depression, treatment from suffering from
Yes.
post-traumatic stress,
Right.
treatment from suffering from addictions, and also to be able to pursue their spiritual practice in a way that perhaps their culture has for thousands of years. I think most of us would be open to the idea that we should be free from suffering and able to practice spirituality in the way that our culture has for millennia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And you know, haven't we overdone it with the pharmacological stuff, right? Like that they have done such a disservice. I've worked in the medical space for 30 years, and I couldn't really participate in it anymore, just to watch what was doing. And then it comes with all of its own addictions and side effects and all the things, right? You
And
speak.
it doesn't work for a lot of people too. There's lots of people
Yes.
who don't find relief. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And add more suicide to the situation in some cases, right? For especially along the lines of depression. But
Yeah.
I had a personal friend of our family who became addiction. You speak about addictions, and I think that's a big deal here, especially in the States. I'm not sure how it is in England, but by no, you know, he wasn't trying to be a drug addict. He had pain, and so it became more and more and more addicted to the things, and to the point where he didn't know what to do with himself. The amount was so huge, he couldn't even get it
Yes.
prescribed at that level anymore. So he went to Mexico and did the Ibogaine treatment. He was there for about 2 weeks and came back with no addiction, completely gone.
Yeah. It's like a
Complete-
miracle.
Completely gone. And came back like really like open and aware and connected, and can't imagine that, you know, he lived his life like that anymore. So that's just one example of hundreds of thousands of them, of those that I'm certain that you could speak to.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things about ibogaine that makes it such a special plant ally to work with is that it actually means that you don't go through any dangerous physical withdrawal process of opioids.
Yeah.
So unlike any other substance that we've ever used or worked with to help people come off opiates, it usually means you're subbing in one opiate for another while you wean somebody off, because the physical withdrawal is so difficult and dangerous for people, maybe even life-threatening. And ibogaine can bond with whatever is needed in the brain and allow you to be free from it without going through that physical process, which I just think is actually quite miraculous.
Yeah,
it is.
So yeah, so why aren't we using it? What is the barrier, right? Is it just not enough research in your opinion? You know, how do we get past this stage? I mean, it feels like, you know, we lost so much time. As you suggested, this was going on back in the 60s and 70s. And then there was, for us, it was Vietnam and all of that. And then the no drugs. And so we lost an entire, you know, couple generations. Yeah. So how do we go from here? What are the roadblocks?
Well, I think we are doing exactly that by having these conversations out in the open. And for me, being a psychedelic advocate means having the difficult conversations with people who might not be actually already in my echo chamber and converted to this way of thinking, and actually being okay with going out onto podcasts and platforms where this may not be something that people have considered or thought about before. And so I think having these conversations with anyone who'll listen is a big part of the process. I do write for mainstream media publications here in the UK, and so getting the word out into the media, getting the word out as far and as wide as possible of the potential of these things The research is really important, because I think people rely on research as a way to understand the world around them, and that feels dependable and safe, and you almost can't argue against it. And the body of research that's building at the moment is phenomenal. And so having more funding into research and having more research circulated as well. So there's so many studies out there. If you find one, or you read one, or you find it interesting, share it on Facebook, circulate it with friends and family, just so that the word becomes out more and more. And it basically, what we want to do is normalize the conversation about it, so that people feel like it's an avenue that isn't stigmatized anymore. And I think having the conversations as well about these things in a treatment context allows us to see the potential away from the kind of recreational context. And I don't know if your listeners know, but things like ibogaine and ayahuasca are not recreational substances. No. Like, you would never in a million years go to a party and take a little bit of ayahuasca. Mainly because it's a purgative, so you would be having a really bad time at that party, you know.
A little bit like Theo, maybe.
You know what I mean? Right. And so these are really deeply healing substances, and it's like saying that you'd go to a party and just like do a bit of chemo. Like, you just wouldn't do that, like, because it's really physically hard work, and mentally hard work too. Like, there can be aspects of the experience that some people reach bliss states, some people find enjoyable, but many people I've spoken to who've taken ibogaine spend the 12 hours, it's a long time, looking back over every misaligned thing that they've done in their entire life, and taking stock, like a audit of every kind of misdoing. Like, that doesn't sound like fun. And so I think part of the solution is understanding that people aren't just druggies doing these things for fun. This isn't within that paradigm. This is very much a different thing. And we need to have the nuance to be able to discuss and understand that this is a therapy. This is also a way of spiritual connection. And I think that's equally important. And I think you guys are so lucky in the Americas that your spiritual path and practices are so protected. That's part of your constitution, that people are able to practice their spirituality, whatever that comes with. And part of ayahuasca is a spiritual path for many people from many cultures, from the Latin Americas, from the indigenous peoples of your land. So also bringing into the conversation about that, like in the decriminalized nature movement, understanding that there can be really, that this is an integral part of a practice, not necessarily something that people are just doing as part of a party lifestyle.
I want to talk about that, and that is the integration. So I'm going to be a little open here and personal and tell you that we have had some ceremonies, and we have family members who have had issues with addictions and ADHD and several other things. And so we did the MAO DMT here. And what was so interesting is everyone had a different reaction, of course. Some people are throwing up, some people are seeing God, some people are just in this loving place. The cool thing is it only lasts for 20 minutes or something, right? But the after effects, I feel like, are what is most important, right? And so you speak to the integration. Now, I think, I mean, we had a shaman here and whatever, but we did not have the follow-up and the integration. And I feel like for a couple of the people who did it, that was a huge, huge missing link. And they got a little caught up in some things afterwards. Like the process was unfinished for them. So I want you, that's why I love what you're doing. So I think this takes it to this place where people are like, oh, I'm just going to do this thing. I have this shaman. But I think it's the integration. It's the piece that you understand and that you know about, and that there are integrators who are guiding people through their process, right? So
Mhm.
speak to the integration and maybe some examples of what you've seen and what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you've identified that, because I think people can see this heightened, expanded states experience as what they're chasing, and often can see it in the paradigm of the kind of magic bullet, the way that we see things within our pharmacological thing. I take this thing, I feel differently, life's better, I move on. And really, it's a completely different paradigm from pharmacological pursuits of feeling better, because it's not that you take the thing and the thing makes you feel better. It's that you take the thing and the thing allows you to see what's really going on in your life, so that you can make changes and do the really hard work of making your life more what it needs to be, so that you feel happier, or you feel less anxious, or you have a different relationship with food or substances or whatever it is. And often the reason we've been running away from those things, or suppressing them, or not identifying them for a long time, is because they're really difficult things to sit with.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's the reason why integration, you often will need support, and it's really hard, because if it was easy, you probably would have done it anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And so when you have a vision, let's say you have worked with a substance. I'm going to go with mushrooms just because that's the thing that I tend to work with my clients most with. So I've got tons of case study experience around this.
Mhm.
You come in to work with the substance. The first integration begins at preparation. So if you're preparing properly for an experience, you make your integration process much, much easier. When I work with clients, I typically work with them for at least 5 weeks prior to their experience,
Oh, wow.
so that they can prepare, and we prepare
Yes.
holistically. So we prepare their physical body. What are they eating? How are they treating their physical body? Do they move, or is their energy stagnant every day? Um, are they kind of in a loving relationship with their body? Do they talk kindly to themselves, or do they kind of pull parts of themselves apart in the mirror? All things to do with your physical body. And then we move on to look at your mental health and well-being, that kind of relationship that you have with yourself, what your mood is like, the way that you kind of look after your emotional state, all of these types of things. Whether you have any practices to regulate your emotions, like meditation or yoga or journaling, anything you do for self-awareness, like again journaling, or perhaps going to therapy or coaching, counseling, anything like that. So
Right.
really, this preparation is taking a whole look at who you are and how you're operating in your life. We do the same with spirituality, and we do the same just around basically all of the things, like your professional life, your relationships, all of these things, because the more you go in knowing, the less likely that you're going to have something revealed to you that is completely like, oh my God, I had no idea, right? We've got
Right.
time to prepare for that, because that
Right.
does sometimes happen to people, especially if you've got quite a lot of cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance is a fancy psychological term for when your mind is thinking one thing, but your actions are doing another thing,
Yes.
right? So perhaps you're deeply in love with your husband, but you're also having an affair. Or perhaps you really love animals, but you're also eating them. Like, cognitive dissonance happens in big and small ways throughout our life. And what psychedelics often do is it brings our conscious mind and our subconscious mind together to have a dialogue. And we get to see where all of those cracks or misalignments are happening. And then we're invited to bring them into alignment. And that's where the tough work happens. Are you going to end that affair, or are you going to stop seeing that partner, or are you going to fess up and apologize? Like, you have to make a choice or a change, because that wasn't aligned with who you want to be and how you want to operate, right? So it's almost like your values are doing one thing, and what your actions are might not be doing that. So even on a smaller level, perhaps you want to be a healthy person, you want to be a healthy parent for your children, and then at the same time, every night you get to the cookie jar, and then every morning you think, oh, I'm going to go for a run. Oh, I'm just rushed off my feet. There you have a small instance where your values and your actions aren't lining up. And so what will happen when you have the psychedelic experience is often you'll be aware of that. And then if you're aware of that and you do nothing, well, your life still hasn't changed, because this is not a magic formula.
Yes.
But if you become aware of that and then you commit to change, and ideally have someone to support you with change or a framework for it, or you have tools to support you, then what you can actually do is bring what you believe and who you want to be in greater sense of alignment with the way that you act in your day-to-day life. And ultimately, that provides a deeper sense of well-being. And so when you're looking therapeutically, that might mean not drinking alcohol when you're an alcoholic. When you're an anorexic person, that might mean not preventing yourself from eating certain foods and eating in a different relationship with yourself. But when you take it out of the therapy space, all of us have ways that we're not quite lined up, right? And so the integration piece is really about, how do I be different now I know what I know?
Yeah.
That is
So
so brilliant. Yeah, that's really
Yes.
powerful. And you know what? It's something that I feel like it keeps coming up in our podcasts in various topics. It comes back to this: what are your values and are you living into them or not? And it's so fundamental to how you're showing up on the planet. So it affects everything. I love how you express that.
So, Marci always says I'm the sciencey one. So
She
I
is.
would want to know, like, what's the chemistry? But so what I'm understanding from listening to some of your podcasts, but it's about you mentioned the consciousness and sort of becoming one, right? But it's also, is it because of the neuroplasticity, right? And the changing of your brain. So does that happen sort of in conjunction with this? Is this like sort of a byproduct of the plant medicine? Or talk a little bit more about, I'm sure I just really messed that up, but
I love any invitation to geek out on the science about this. But there's kind of
Well,
two aspects to the answer. The first of
okay.
all is about what happens when you're on psychedelics, what happens to your brain then. And then the second is about what happens after. So during your psychedelic experience, this is for traditional psychedelics. This is not applicable to things like MDMA, which is more of an empathogen, meaning it allows you to be more empathetic, and it acts on different aspects of your brain. It is considered by some as psychedelic and is used in PTSD trials, but it works on a different mechanism. Here I'm talking about your LSD, your psilocybin, your ayahuasca, DMT containing substances such as the toad that you mentioned. All of those classic psychedelics, what you would consider ibogaine as well, or peyote, those kinds of things. They basically, when you have them, they increase connectivity between different areas of your brain. That's why sometimes you can have hallucinations, because you are connecting the memory part of your brain and the dreaming parts of your brain and the vision parts of your brain, or the audio parts of your brain, all at the same time. What scientists really expected to find was that there would be more brain activity, but that wasn't what we found. There's actually less brain activity. So your default mode network, where you're always thinking all the time, that's essentially switched off during a psychedelic experience.
Nice.
So all of your autopilot is gone offline. And so then all of the really creative bits, the memories, the kind of, I don't know, the ability to like listen to music, all of that is then in the background connecting to each other in ways that it might not have connected since you were a baby, or since you were a small child, or for a very, very long time. And so that's really fascinating, because that's why we often think in therapy context, it allows you to think outside of your normal frame of thinking, or it gives you a fresh perspective, because it switches off the kind of autopilot that we tend to live on, and invites so many different new ways of connection in the brain.
So it's like a hard reset on your computer.
Exactly. Exactly that. That's how I explain it to my clients. It's like a hard reset. And then what happens afterwards is what I find equally fascinating. And that's where this neuroplasticity piece comes in that you mentioned. That is a fancy way of saying your brain can change more easily. We have a process in our brain where between one part of your brain and another, it's myelinated. The synapses are essentially, they're wrapped in insulation so that the electric can fire from one place to another as easily as it can. Our brain always wants to save energy. It's quite an easy thing for it to do, to go down a pathway that's myelinated.
Yes.
Again, that's why we have our default mode network, because it's like the parts of our brain we always use are like the highways in our brain, and the kind of paths that we don't usually use are like old kind of overgrown countryside roads that are like really hard to get down. And if you want to change the way that you think, you then are starting to go down much more difficult routes when your brain could go down the kind of easier one. And when your brain is in its usual fixed state, that feels really hard and there's a lot of resistance. So if you ever say, I'm going to start my new way of eating on Monday, and you don't, or you start a New Year's resolution and you can't go through, and you think, why am I like this? Well, that's why, because your brain isn't in a state to change it. There are a few ways to increase neuroplasticity, but this is one of the most quick and effective ways that you can create the same effect that taking 6 months to 3 years of meditation practice is equivalent to a single dose of psychedelics in terms of how much that can impact your brain's way to basically change the way that it thinks. Now, this is both a blessing and a curse, because if you use that time after your experience to consolidate the same old bad pathways that you came into the experience with, you've wasted that opportunity. You've wasted that plasticity, and you've just carved the other pathways even deeper. Whereas if you go into it with this intention that you are going to make these changes, and that you're going to use this time where you have this kind of neuroplasticity on overdrive to its maximum capacity, then you're able to make massive change with a lot less resistance. And my clients describe it really as essentially, it's like there's more space between your thought and your action. So instead of kind of acting on autopilot, or I'm just going to the fridge and getting that thing that I always get, there's that moment where you go, is that really what I want to do? Is that really in alignment with where I'm going and my goals? No. Okay, I'll go have a glass of water, or I'll have this healthier snack instead. And so having that spaciousness in the way that you think actually gives you a lot more operating control on your kind of day-to-day running of your behaviors.
That is something we talk about all the time, is that, things are always coming at you. You have the choice of how you react, but we get into our, like you said, the highway, the way we do it automatically. This happens, I'm mad, I'm reacting, whatever. My child did the same thing over again, and I'm just coming back with anger or automatic reaction, versus pausing and unlearning all the stuff that we've picked up, and then mindfully reacting, responding the way we want to. And so to have something that makes it easier to do that, because like you said, that's not easy. That is hard work. That's fantastic. It's what we need.
I want to bring up one more subject, because we probably have just a few more minutes to talk, but I wanted to talk about the subject of microdosing, right? I think we are warrior parents, and there's a lot of parents out there who are really having difficulty with their children, and young adults. Marci and I, kids are in their 30s right now.
And themselves. Plenty of people struggling with mental illness, depression, anxiety, all of these kinds of things right now.
So microdosing, I have done a bout of microdosing as a mother myself, and have found it really helpful. I had a very difficult pregnancy with a lot of sickness. I suffered with a condition called hyperemesis gravidarum, which is essentially all day, every day vomiting, was in and out of hospital a lot of times. And so that gave me a really difficult, I basically had PTSD from it, and also felt, because it was a woman's trouble, that was totally minimized in a way that it wouldn't have been if that had been any other circumstance in my life, making me as ill as that. And so I had this really difficult experience, and coming through that, and knowing that I wanted to heal it so that I could be the best parent to Theo, I knew that microdosing was going to be powerful for that. I'd accessed microdosing in the past, but this was particularly powerful for me because it helped me reduce the day-to-day anxiety that I was feeling around the PTSD, because as soon as I'd feel a little bit sick or nauseous, it would really trigger me and bring me back into that state in my body. And so it allowed me to break free from the anxiety and sadness that I had been feeling. Alongside it, I did see a therapist, and I think that that's a really important part of any healing journey. So I'm not saying just microdose and that's enough. You know, I was doing all of the other things. I just think it made doing all of the other things more potent and work much faster for me. And so I'm hesitant to ever recommend a certain way of healing or practicing things to people, because everybody is so different. However, there's lots of amazing resources. If microdosing is something that's interesting for you, try having a look at A Really Good Day. It's a book about somebody's experience microdosing, and just start to explore whether that might be something that you're interested in. It's not always accessible or legal in various different places around the world. Unfortunately, it can be quite difficult to access. And I'd never want you to get yourself into a situation.
A legal situation. Yes.
We're certainly not recommending that.
Yes.
It's important to look into as well. But if you are in the privileged position to be able to access, especially like places like Colorado now are allowing you in the US, and there are various different places. I work with clients out of the Netherlands. I live in east of England. It's an hour flight for me to go from my city I live in to Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands. So it's actually quite a short commute to work, really. Shorter than a 2-hour train.
And that's where you're able to do this work. That's good to know. You know, I'm really hoping we're starting to see some movement here in the United States. And as we said, you know, it's been kind of shut down since the 60s. Timothy Leary, all the backlash against that completely shut it down, in spite of all the good research that was coming out in these areas, especially things like addiction and alcoholism. But I'm hoping that now we're going to start to see more of that in the United States, where people can look for providers for that and be able to go. And I think it's worth mentioning that just in January, the VA announced a large program of research for veterans, because it has all of these different psychedelic therapies have been so promising for helping with PTSD. And as we know, we have a huge mental health crisis with veterans here in the United States. It's not just veterans, but it's one, because the VA is serving veterans, it's a place where they can do that work. So I'm really hoping that that helps to destigmatize, to make it more available in a safe way, with all of the integration that you and Debbie were talking about, with the follow-up, with the preparing before, to really help people radically change their lives. And the other thing that's epidemic in the US is this opioid crisis, and this huge level of addiction that we've been seeing. And these people who have fallen into this, again, through no fault of their own, that, you know, it was pushed on them. It was what was done was criminal, in my opinion. But now, how do we help them, and for them to have long-term possibility of putting that addiction behind them with and moving forward is just it's so important. And I really want to believe that we're going to step up and support this.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I just want to signpost people to MAPS is an incredible organization doing research and amazing work with people. And you might be able to go and be a participant in their trials. They do PTSD, MDMA assisted therapies in the US. Fireside offer free psychedelic integration support. They are a helpline, and also if you're having a negative trip experience, they can just be there to support you on the phone. So just Google these resources. And if you are inspired by this and you want to campaign, Decriminalize Nature runs all across the US as well. And each kind of local area has pockets of places that are campaigning for the decriminalization of being able to work with these potent substances. So if any of those are useful, I really hope that you reach out, because they're fantastic organizations doing really important work.
Yes, thank you for that. We will make sure to put links for those in the show notes. And what about for you? Do you have some links for you specifically?
Yeah, I'll share some links with you. If you'd ever like to come with me on a journey to the Netherlands, I work with plenty of people from the US. I used to also run stuff in Costa Rica, but now that my baby is so little, I've brought everything closer to home again for a little while. But I also support people digitally. I have free preparation and integration courses that you can access through my website. So I'll share all those links with you guys as well, if that
That's
seems like
wonderful.
something you'd be interested in.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
Rosie, thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and
Yeah.
it makes me really optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having the courage to open these conversations on your platform.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're grateful for your time, for sure.
And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools. And through a special partnership with Donna Appadoni, we have created a group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Here's Donna.
I glide with ease, effortlessly, from one phase of my life to another. I am grateful for all of it. Hi, I'm Donna Appadoni. I'm the person who writes and produces meditations that are used by Cour Experience. What are you grateful for today? We all have something we can be grateful for, but it's pretty easy to overlook the opportunities, all the nice people we know, all of the good things that happen all around us every day. This meditation is a reminder to look for the good things. They're there. And when you can, say thank you to someone. It makes you feel good. It makes them feel good. Even if you just think thank you, it's still a good thing. Make a mental note that something good happened today. Be grateful. And remember, whatever's happening with you right now, you can do anything you set your mind to do. I remember that glitter is not essential. I remember my purpose. I continue to define my purpose. I carefully consider my options. I trust. I trust. I am grateful for all of it.
Donna's book, called Drive Time Meditations, is a collection of 183 of her purpose-driven motivators. Drive Time Meditations is available on Amazon.
Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Appadoni with music from Scott Holmes. The full collection of meditations is in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, available on Amazon and at donnaappadoni.com. Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Cour Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.